Hey YouTube, this is Elk, and today we're doing Ask Reddit Narrated, Episode 6. When was your gut feeling actually right? Found a new flatmate had killed himself a week after moving in. I advertised a room on our national buy-sell page. A guy replies to me, and we meet a few times. Really nice French guy, great English, stable job, and into the outdoors. He moves in on Saturday. We talk over the next few days for no more than 5 minutes in passing around the house during the day. Friday, Saturday, Sunday come around, and I have not seen or heard him, but his door is shut. I thought he was working nights and we just didn't sync up. I joked with my partner that he was a drug addict and was dead, but we both laughed it off. I mean, what are the chances? Sunday evening, I followed through with my gut that something wasn't right and knocked on his door. Worst case, he's asleep and I wake him. Best case, he's not there. He killed himself 6 days after moving in. Police estimate he had been cold for 3 days. He had been suffering from serious depression and planned it all out. I felt so guilty for not seeing it, but I barely knew him. Total of maybe 10 minutes talking. Twice, while delivering pizza to shady neighborhoods. Things didn't look right. I trusted my instincts and booked. Both times, no one ever called back to ask about their food never arriving. That's all the proof I need. Growing up, I was always wary of my uncle on my dad's side of the family, not blood related. Even as a young child, I just knew that I didn't like being around him. He never gave me any reason to feel this way, and I never voiced it to anyone. As I grew older, my family moved away and I saw less of him. But anytime my extended family met for holidays, I would see him and avoid him. A couple years down the track, I was around 12 or 13 when my parents sat me and my older brother down and told us that my cousin, my uncle's daughter, had been raped and molested by him from a young age. This had all come to light when my aunt caught it happening. Later found out she was abused by him too. Really wish my gut feeling hadn't been right about that one. When I was a young woman, my husband and I lived on a military base. At the time, the base was wide open and many local people used it as a shortcut from one town to another. The base also had free base newspapers available at many places on base. One week, the newspaper said that the facilities engineer, base maintenance, were going to begin installing attic fans into our townhouses. Sure enough, someone banged on my door later in the week and announced he was there to install my attic fan. I was immediately suspicious. He was not military, dirty, scraggly beard, paint-stained clothes, but mostly it was my dog's reaction. Candy was a husky shepherd mix, so not a small dog. She'd put herself between me and him as best she could. Her hackles were up and she was growling. That deep, bass in the chest growl that you feel more than hear. I asked to see a work order and an ID. He said, "I don't need no fucking work order," and yanked open the screen door. It was latched, but those kinds of latches are meant to keep toddlers and dogs in, not grown men out. Candy roared and went for his throat. He jumped back and slammed the screen. I grabbed Candy and dragged her back, slammed and locked the door, ran to the back and slammed and locked that. Then I called the MPs. They came out, verified that my street was not due to get attic fans for a couple of weeks, and took all the information I could give them, which wasn't much. I never heard anything back, so they probably never identified him. 2 or 3 weeks later, the real installers came from facility engineers in uniform. They promptly produced work orders and ID. Candy looked at them and went back to playing with the baby. I'm absolutely certain that she saved me from rape, possibly from murder. It was 1995. I was 18, still living with my parents, and I was walking home from a friend's house at about 2 a.m. in the middle of the summer. He only lived 5 or 6 blocks away, and we often hung out watching movies after I got off work. Usually, I would drive to his house because we'd been out with other friends. But this night, I had parked at home and we walked to his place. There's not usually a lot of traffic between our houses, but this night, I was about halfway home when a pickup truck drove by with 2 guys in the cab and 2 in the bed. I immediately felt like I was in danger. I saw the truck turn the corner, and I drove over some hedges in the closest yard I could find. I hid under them. I saw the truck come back around the corner and slowly drive down the street. When it got to where I was hiding, I heard one of the guys say, "Where did he go?" And another responded that he didn't know. They kept driving and I didn't see them again. I stayed hidden for a good 15 minutes before getting up and running the rest of the way home. I'm certain they would have jumped me if they found me. I stopped at Home Depot to pick up an item, so I knew it was going to be a quick trip. I'm in the store and notice I'm pretty much the only girl in there besides employees. I couldn't find what I was looking for and had to ask multiple employees before I found it. I check out, and as I'm heading out to my car, I notice a shady dude standing against a tree on one side of my car. On the other side of my car is another shady guy, sticking his arm outside of his car window. When I walked out, they both turned and stared at me. My heart dropped. I started to feel queasy, and my mind instantly knew to turn back around and go inside. I stood there shaking at the front of the store until I could get the courage to ask an employee to walk me out to my car. As soon as they saw me walking out with an employee, the guy standing by the tree walked around my car and into the driver's side of the car parked next to me. To this day, I swear, I was a short walk away from being kidnapped. I used to work in the ER. I had a man come in with ripping chest pain that started not but 30 minutes prior after he moved something heavy at his office. I knew he was going to die just by looking at him. Massive, overwhelming dread just seemed to engulf me. I did his EKG and I hoped something would be wrong with it so we could get him a bed. His EKG was perfect. Not 5 minutes later, he went into cardiac arrest on our waiting room floor. After running the code for 45 minutes, he didn't make it. He had a massive aortic dissection. There wasn't much hope. This was almost 3 years ago, and I've seen more shit since then, but the memory is still burned into my mind, and it hurts knowing I was the last person to speak to him. I was a 20-year-old student, alone in my apartment one evening. I was expecting the cable guy, so when I heard a knock at the door, I opened it. I saw an older man that definitely was not the cable guy, as he did not have a uniform on. I asked him what he wanted. He said he was going around the apartments, installing security alarms. I right away did not trust him, and told him that it was a bad time, and that my roommate was on the phone long distance, back when long distance was expensive, with her parents, and was going through some personal stuff. She was not there, but I did not want him to think I was alone. He asked where she was. I just closed the door in his face and said, "Not a good time." I called my landlord the next morning and asked her about installing security alarms, and she had no idea what I was talking about and did not authorize it. Women, if you ever get into a situation where it looks like you are alone, really try to convince the person that is making you feel uneasy that you are not alone. Another time, when I was young, walking home in the dark, and 2 men stopped their car and started saying lewd things to me. I just walked up to a house and knocked on the door, and they drove off quickly. Way more vulnerable when you're alone. Driving in Pittsburgh, I stop at a red light. Hill goes up on my left, downhill on my right. Poor visibility to the left. The light turns green, but my brain tells me, "Hey bud, wait a sec." I think this is a little weird, but I hold off on going. A millisecond later, a massive navy blue F-350 comes barreling downhill through the intersection from my left, blowing past the red light at about 45, then trundles down the hill. If I'd have gone, I would have been destroyed by 3 tons of Ford truck, for sure. Instead, I trusted the spider sense. I had a work friend who used to come over to smoke blunts and play Xbox. I liked the guy, even though I knew he was a bit odd. He was really good at Call of Duty and rolled a mean blunt. He used to tell some tall tales that everyone knew were bullshit. Well, my wife, who was only my girlfriend back then, always got a creep vibe from him. She said he looked at her with so much anger and malice, but never indicated any specific action that made her uncomfortable. After a while, I stopped hanging out with a friend since he wasn't coming to town as much for work. Fast forward a few years, and another mutual friend calls me to say that the Xbox friend was killed by police. Unfortunately, only after he had already killed his neighbor and his wife. Crazy. I had been living and working in Korea, and one day I was coming up out of a subway station and saw a man talking to another foreign woman. She had that polite, frozen smile on her face. The "why is this guy talking to me" smile. I walked up to her, linked my arm with hers, and said, "Hey Sarah, there you are. Are you ready to go?" And just started walking. The guy followed us, but I sped up and made an abrupt turn into a coffee shop. We hid, and I saw him walk past, still looking for her. We ended up getting coffee and chatting for a bit, and I found out that he had followed her off the train and had been getting increasingly aggressive for the last 10 minutes. I don't know what might have happened, but I'm really glad I interfered. When I was a young kid back in the 80s, I was playing in my front lawn when this van pulled up on the road and the sliding door opened. A guy, about 19 to 20, aggressively waved at me to come to the van, and I immediately knew something wasn't right. So I ran inside and told my parents, and they freaked out and ran outside, but they were gone by then. Stranger danger wasn't really a thing back then, and I had no idea what an abduction was at the time. But looking back on it, my life could have ended that day had I chosen to go over to the van. I often wondered after that day if they ever did get a kid to get into their van. Last year, I stayed up late watching Rick and Morty. My mom had been battling stage 4 metastatic breast cancer for a while. That night, she walked downstairs and just sat there with me until I decided to go to bed. I looked at her, and in my heart, I knew she was close to leaving. So I said goodnight, and she said goodbye, which confused me. Until the next morning when my dad woke me up and told me she had passed away overnight. It still makes me wonder how we both knew. When I was a kid, I had this teacher in grade 3 who was really creepy towards all of us girls. We would notice him looking at girls' butts or down their shirts. He was really weird and always found a reason to make girls stay after class for whatever. He gave me a really terrible feeling that I had never gotten from someone before. I never got too close to him and always made sure I wasn't in his room alone. I'm 25 now, and he just got arrested last year for having child pornography and was also caught with a hidden camera in his pen that he would use to take pictures down girls' shirts with. So creepy. I can't imagine the amount of videos and pictures this man has. He was an older man when he taught me in grade 3 and just got caught last year. I hadn't spoken to a certain friend for a couple of weeks, but got a gut feeling to contact and talk to her at a certain moment. I immediately messaged her. That's how we always talk. We talked for a couple hours and into the night. A month later, out of the blue, she just messages me, "Thank you." I asked her why she's thanking me. She said she was contemplating suicide on the day I got my gut feeling and had contacted her. Because she got to talk to someone on that specific day, she dropped the idea and hasn't attempted it again ever since. I'm going to start this with the fact that I'm a man of science. In high school, I had a friend get in a terrible accident. He was in the ICU, emergency surgery, the whole deal. It had been a few days since the accident. I got a call from a mutual friend who more recently visited him in the ICU. He reports he's still comatose, intubated, but they feel hopeful. Later that night, I'm playing video games. I just suddenly feel my whole body just shudder. It's hard to describe, but I just felt wrong all over. I put the controller down and just sat there, stunned. I knew my friend was gone. I can't explain it, but I knew. Sure enough, within the hour, we got a call that he had passed. Like I said, I can't explain it. I don't believe in psychics, mediums, ghosts, etc. The rational part of my brain knows it's a coincidence, a panic attack, an unreal emotion manifesting in a moment of quiet solitude. If my friend hadn't passed, I would have forgotten this episode. But man, that's the closest I've ever felt to something supernatural. That'll conclude today's Ask Reddit episode. Thank you so much for coming on this journey with me. If you liked the video, please consider liking and subscribing. Until next time.